If you grew up feeling alone, there's a good chance you spent years believing something was wrong with you. You watched other people form connections so easily while you stayed quiet in the background, learning to keep your thoughts to yourself, learning to entertain your own mind, learning to survive in spaces that never truly felt safe. It may have felt like you were missing out on something everyone else received naturally. But what if that experience didn't make you weaker? What if it shaped you into someone with rare psychological strengths that most people never develop? Psychology shows that people who spend a lot of time alone during their early years often build deep internal abilities, emotional, mental, and social, that are not obvious on the surface but incredibly powerful in adulthood. So if you grew up lonely, these are not wounds to be ashamed of. These are traits that quietly set you apart. The first rare trait you likely developed is a powerful inner world. When you don't have constant external stimulation, your mind becomes your primary companion. Research on solitude and cognitive development indicates that people who spend more time alone in childhood often develop stronger imagination, deeper self-reflection, and more complex thinking patterns. While others relied on noise and distraction, you learned how to sit with your thoughts. You created conversations in your head. You analyzed situations from multiple angles. You found comfort in ideas, music, stories, and dreams. This is why today you may be someone who thinks deeply about life, who notices details others miss, who can entertain yourself without needing constant validation. What once felt like isolation actually trained your brain to become a rich, creative, and self-sustaining space. The second rare trait is emotional independence. When you grow up without consistent emotional support, you are forced to learn how to process your feelings on your own. At the time, this may have felt overwhelming. You may have cried alone, solved problems alone, celebrated your wins quietly. But psychology shows that this kind of early self-reliance often leads to higher emotional resilience in adulthood. You don't collapse when people misunderstand you. You don't need constant reassurance to feel okay. You've already survived moments where no one came to save you, and that builds a quiet confidence. You know how to sit with discomfort and move through it. You know how to self-soothe. And while others may panic when they are left alone with their thoughts, you've been doing that your entire life. What once felt like emotional neglect has turned into emotional strength. The third rare trait is a deep ability to understand others. This might sound surprising because loneliness is often associated with social difficulty, but research in social psychology suggests that people who grow up observing rather than constantly participating become highly perceptive. When you were alone, you watched people. You studied their tone, their body language, their behavior. You learned to read the room because you were often on the outside of it. That's why today you can sense when someone's energy shifts. You can tell when someone is pretending to be okay. You pick up on things people don't say. You became emotionally intelligent, not through constant interaction, but through careful observation. Your loneliness trained you to see people clearly, and that makes you someone who can offer genuine understanding and empathy. The fourth rare trait is comfort with yourself. Many people spend their entire lives trying to avoid being alone because being alone forces them to face who they are. But you had no choice. You met yourself early. You learned your own patterns, your own preferences, your own way of thinking. Research on self-concept shows that people who spend more time in solitude often develop a stronger and more stable sense of identity. You don't change yourself just to fit into every environment. You know what you like, you know what drains you, you know what matters to you. And while others may constantly seek approval, you are able to stand on your own because your relationship with yourself was built long before your relationship with the world. The fifth rare trait is selective connection. If you grew up lonely, you don't just attach to anyone. You value depth over quantity. You don't want 100 surface level relationships. You want one real one. Psychology shows that people who experienced early social isolation often become more intentional in choosing their connections. You've learned what it feels like to be unseen. So when you open your heart to someone, it's real. You listen deeply. You show up fully. You don't take trust lightly. This is why your relationships, even if they are few, tend to be meaningful and emotionally rich. You are not interested in performing for acceptance. You are interested in being understood. And there is another hidden strength that often comes from growing up lonely, your ability to grow without external validation. When no one was watching, you were still evolving. When no one applauded you, you kept going. Research on intrinsic motivation shows that people who had to rely on themselves for encouragement often develop a stronger internal drive. You don't do things just for attention. You do them because they matter to you. That's why your progress is real. That's why your goals are personal. That's why your achievements are deeply fulfilling. So if you grew up lonely, it makes sense that you sometimes still feel different. It makes sense that crowded rooms can feel exhausting. It makes sense that you need time alone to recharge. But different does not mean damaged. Your brain adapted in ways that gave you depth, awareness, resilience, and authenticity. You became someone who can survive in silence, someone who can think deeply, someone who can love meaningfully, someone who can stand alone without feeling empty. And maybe no one told you this while you were growing up, but your younger self was not weak for feeling alone. That version of you was learning skills that would later become your superpowers. Every moment you spent in your own company was shaping your mind. Every time you comforted yourself, you were building emotional strength. Every time you watched the world from the outside, you were developing insight. So instead of asking, why was I so lonely? Try asking, what did that experience give me? Because it gave you self-awareness. It gave you emotional depth. It gave you independence. It gave you the ability to connect in ways that are real, not performative. It gave you a mind that can think beyond the surface. You are not behind in life. You are not socially broken. You are someone who took a different path to becoming whole. If this message made you feel seen, it's because there are parts of you that are finally being recognized, not as flaws, but as rare strengths. And there is so much more to understand about the psychology of your personality, your past, and your hidden advantages. Subscribe for more personality insights that help you see yourself in a new way, because the more you understand who you are, the more powerful you become.